this old saying, maybe you've heard it or seen it. Sometimes it shows up on posters, sometimes greeting cards, plaques, different things like that. And I've got it on the screen here for you. If you love something, it's supposed to be on the screen for you. There we go. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it was and always will be yours. If it never returns, it was never yours to begin with. You familiar with that? You guys seen that before? Maybe you have it on something, stitched on a pillow or something like that. I don't know. It's nice, isn't it? Set it free. Love's not about bondage. It's about freedom. Set it free. Notice that it says something, not someone, if you love something. So I want you to try that out sometime on your favorite food. If you love pepperoni pizza, set it free. And if it returns to you, it's yours. And lo and behold, it's still there. It must be mine. I'm going to eat it, right? I came across an additional part to this, and that's up there too. If it just sits in your living room, messes up your stuff, eats your food, uses your telephone, takes your money, and never behaves as if you actually set it free in the first place, you either married it or gave birth to it. So, go home and stitch that on your pillow, huh? I'd love it. I think I will stitch it on my pillow. So, this is the final sermon in this short series that we've been in over the last 4 weeks. Our first week we talked about forgiving like Jesus. We've talked about serving like Jesus. Last week we talked about speaking like Jesus. This morning we're going to talk about loving like Jesus. What does that look like? I just got to tell you, as I've refreshed myself in this again in preparation for this morning, it's an overwhelming topic. To love like Jesus. And you saw the scripture this morning in the video, Jesus gave this command that we are to love like Him. How do you do that? What does that look like? And as you wrestle through this, did Jesus give us any idea except His own example? And He did. There was a guy that came to Jesus. Jesus was in a debate with the religious leaders of his day, which he found himself in quite often because they were trying to live out religion by all that they did, not a relationship with God. And so this was a battle constantly for Jesus to point out their problem that, man, you guys are trying to be good enough and you can't be good enough. And so he's having this debate with these guys and he finishes up and this other religious leader comes up to him. And we read this in Mark chapter 12. And if you have your Bible, it starts in verse 29 or 28, where this guy says to Jesus, hey, what is the greatest commandment? Now, let me give you a little background before we read this. You got to understand there was over 600 commandments that the religious leaders of Jesus' day recognized. I mean, think about trying to keep those. We talk about the 10 top, right? The 10 commandments. But think about over 600. And so this guy comes to Jesus, he's a religious leader, and probably has lived his life trying to keep these 600 plus commandments. And he listens to Jesus, and he hears his wisdom and the way that he's speaking. And I'd like to know, which is the top one? Because that was a debate in the religious circles. Which ones were the heavier ones? Some of them were not so heavy as some other ones. And so they debated all the times, which ones are we supposed to really follow, and which ones are kind of okay if we kind of ignore them. And so this guy comes to Jesus with this honest, sincere desire to want to know which is the top commandment, which is the one I really need to be concentrating on. And Jesus replies to him, verse 29. The most important commandment is this. Listen, O Israel, love the Lord our God. The Lord our God is one, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. Hey, here's our window right here. This is Jesus giving us a glimpse of what it looks like, what we should do to love like him. It's right there. Jesus is telling this religious leader, this guy who has spent his life trying to serve God, here's the top one. Love God. Love people. So would you put this down for the first one? This is pretty obvious stuff, and some of you have heard this before, and I'd just like to pull it apart a little bit deeper this morning, perhaps. But to love like Jesus, you have to learn to love God deeper. Look what it says. Love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Now, I want you to stop a minute, because when I came across this a few years ago and just really kind of thought about it and was looking at it close, it really struck me as odd. This guy comes to Jesus, and what does he ask him? What is the greatest suggestion? No. What is the greatest commandment? Jesus doesn't say, look, let me give you some ideas. I know you want to know what the greatest commandment is, but here's some thoughts for you. This is not really a command. It's kind of a suggestion. Do your best to love God. Hey, I would be okay with that. Just try to love God more. That's not what's going on here, folks. Understand the weight of what's happening here. He is giving a command. Does that not seem odd to you? I mean, think about that in any kind of relationship. You go to your wife, for instance. You're not loving me. I command you love me right now. Try that on your kids. I mean, think about it. This is a command to love. We look at that in our mindset and we go, man, what is that? I mean, what happens sometimes is we see these kind of scriptures and they're so familiar to us that we don't stop and think about it. But I want you to think about it. Jesus is saying that there is a command to love God. Does that not seem odd to you? Seems really odd to me. When I was dating Louise, I didn't sit down with her one day and say, look, I want to get married. I command you love me. And she didn't look at me and say, I've been waiting for you to command me. Yes, I will. It didn't work that way. We don't typically think of love as something we command. In fact, our minds usually go, you can't do that. It doesn't work. But it does work. Would you put this down? Part of it is because we don't understand biblical love. Biblical love, put this down, seeks the greatest good for the one loved. Now, please follow me. This is so vital to get the rest of this. Biblical love says, I want the greatest good for you. Does that make sense? I mean, when a couple comes to get married, I talk to them about the idea that you've got to lay self down and put the other first. And really what we're talking about is you need to want good for the other person. That's biblical. The Bible talks about love being, I want the greatest good for you. So the question is, what is the greatest good? You go, oh, I don't know, ice cold Coke and Spam Musubi, great good. That's good, but it's not the greatest good, right? Oh, taking care of my family, making sure that they're provided for. Again, good, but not greatest good. The greatest good is God, right? Scripture says every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. Now, here's where it gets heavy. You ready? God doesn't have goodness. He is good. There's a big difference. You and I can possess goodness, our very nature is not good. God can't be anything but good. It's not what he has, it's who he is. So I'm not really sure I follow that. Well, good luck. Just think about that a little bit further. It's not something that he possesses, it's who he is. So, if biblical love is desiring the greatest good for the one I love, and God is the greatest good, then I should want the people that I love to know God. Now, that's great. I get that. I think you understand that. But what if you're God? What's the greatest good? He is. God's the greatest good. There's nothing greater than him. God can't say, well, I want to point you to the greatest. Oh, wait a minute, that's me. See, God wants best for everyone. He's it. He's best. You go, wow, it's kind of arrogant. No, it's just fact. It's just true. God is the source of all good. He is best. And so when God says, listen, I'm going to command you to love me, what's he saying? I want best for you. I'm best. Love me. Says, I'm not really sure I get this. Okay, I want you to think about this. Think about it in the context of children, right? Now, let's suppose that you're out one day working on your roof and doing something up there. Maybe you're putting your Christmas lights. It's kind of that time of year, so we'll say you're putting your Christmas lights up. And as you're up there, the ladder is there, and you forgot something. So you come down the ladder, and you go and get whatever it is, and you come back, and you look up, and your 2-year-old child is now on the roof. They have climbed up the ladder while you were gone, and they're now on the roof. Now, you could handle that in a number of ways. You could say, oh, Junior, I love you, and if you come down, I'll buy you an icy. Okay? That would be incentive. It's called bribery, and it might work. Junior, please don't. No, please don't run so close to the edge. Please don't do that. I'll love you more if you come down. That's begging. Now, you could handle it this way. Junior, stop right there. Sit right where you're at and don't move. And the neighbor's looking out their window going, oh, it's so mean. I can't believe he's so mean. Commanding this child to sit down. So mean. Can you believe he's so mean? No, nobody would do that. Nobody would fault you for that. You are giving a command out of love because that's what's best for them. Amen? So listen, when God says, love me, he's saying, I'm the best. You can't get any better than me. If you will love me, you will have best. So would you put this down? God commands us to love because he is the best, and he wants the best for us. Does that make sense? See, here's what we wrestle with. Let me tell you what we wrestle with. We wrestle with a satanic image of God. That God he is just waiting for us to mess up. He's waiting for us to trip up. He knows we're screw-ups. We're all screw-ups. We're all knuckleheads. He knows it. He's just waiting for it so he can just get him. Right? Say, no, I don't think that. Yes, you do. And I'll tell you how I know that. Because 9 times out of 10, when something bad happens to us, the first thing we start thinking is, what did I do now? God's getting me. What did I do now? And don't act like you don't think that way. I know you think that way. I think that way. You say, where does that come from? It comes from Satan. Satan wants us to think that God's the big ogre in the sky waiting to get us when we screw up. And he's not. Jesus called him Father over and over again, and it really tweaked the religious leaders of his day. They didn't have that kind of relationship. And they didn't think it was right for anybody to have that kind of relationship. But he called him Father because he's Father. And as a father, he wants best for his children, and he says, I'm it, and I want to command you, love me, because when you love me, you get the best, and I want the best for you. This is not some cosmic ego being blown out of proportion. This is a good God who's saying, I have best for you. Love me. Would you notice, if you put out on that next bullet point, it requires complete love. Jesus could have said, and by the way, he's quoting from the Old Testament. He's quoting from the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6. He's quoting from a passage, get this, that every good Jew quoted in the morning and the evening and still does. Every good Jew quotes from this passage, Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's called the Shema. The Lord our God is one, and you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. They quote that. That's how they start their day. So these guys would have immediately known the passage that Jesus was referring to. But I want you to notice how complete this is. He says, with all your heart. That's your emotion. We, in the Western world, constantly think that love is all about emotion. It's how I feel. It's not, but we think that. In fact, that's the basis for a lot of times people getting a divorce, because I don't feel in love anymore. There is an aspect of love that involves our emotion, involves our feeling, and Jesus acknowledged that, hey, you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart. When you think about God and what he has done for you and what he did on the cross through Jesus, it should evoke emotion in you. There are times when we are singing, when we are worshiping, and you're thinking about the truth of the songs. Like this morning, some of those songs were incredible. And it should stir within us emotion. And that's okay. That's part of love. But he goes on and he says soul and mind. What is that? That is the you, the inside of you. This deals with your intellect. See, because in order for me to have legitimate love, I have to know the object being loved in order to really, truly love. And so God says, Jesus says, look, love God with your emotion, but love God with your intellect. Know him. And then he says, with your strength. Well, that has to do with my actions. There's kind of a progression here. Most of us will be attracted to God first emotionally. We'll hear about something he has done for us that it provokes our emotions. We're drawn to him. And then as a result of that, I want to know more about this God. Now it engages my intellect because I want to know more about this God who did this for me. And as a result of understanding who he is and being moved by emotion, now I want to do for him. So there's a progression here. What's Jesus saying? Jesus is quoting from the Old Testament, which is basically saying, look, you need to love God in a complete way. See, here's the problem. If you only have an emotional attachment to God, it's only going to hit you at certain times, like during a worship service. That's why you can go out and live like the world the rest of the week, come in here and get into a worship service and see some lyrics on the screen and hear the music, and it evokes your emotion because you know it's true. Even though you're not living for God, you know it's true. It evokes your emotion. You walk out, I love God so much. In an emotional sense, yes. See, if you only love God emotionally, you'll go out and do whatever you want during the week and just be stirred to him by a song, by a statement, and think that you're in love with God. No. You have a type of love for God, but not a complete love for God. See, because a true love for God will lead you to want to know more about this God. Again, let me kind of put it in the context of the physical because we understand that so much better. I met Louise on a bridge on the campus of the university that we were both attending. I had given a friend of mine a hard time because he was just a really smooth operator. And every time we were together, man, it's like he knew every girl on campus. And every time we'd pass somebody, oh, hey, how you? He'd talk to her, and I'd be standing off to the side, and he wouldn't introduce me. And so I started giving him a hard time. I said, look, dude, You know all these women, you don't introduce me. What's the deal? You afraid I'm going to steal them? And so we had just had this conversation the day before. We're walking across this bridge. Here comes Louise, and he knows her. I didn't know who she was. He stops, starts talking to her, doing he's pretty smooth. And then I just kind of cleared my throat. Oh, yeah, this is my friend Randy. And that's where we met. We kept going, and I thought to myself, wow, nice girl. A couple weeks later, I saw her again. We were in this meeting. We have to be in this meeting, hundreds of people, same meeting. She came late. The place was packed, except there was one seat right next to me. And she walked down the aisle, and I don't know if she said hi to me or I said hi to her. It was like, hey, how are you? And she goes, oh, good. I'm trying to find a place to sit. I said, well, why don't you sit right here? And we talked a little bit, and, well, man, she was even more attractive to me now. Started getting those little things in your stomach, you know? And what I wanted to do is find out more about her. I wanted to get some knowledge about this girl. Who is she? What's she all about? Where is she from? And what happened was, as I'm getting this knowledge, as I'm gathering this information, I'm getting sucked into this whole deal. I went from infatuation to really starting to like her, to then really loving her. And some crazy thing happened I wanted to do for her. Well, oh, you need something? Yeah, sure, I can be there. Yeah, sure, I can do that for you. That's what Jesus is talking about here. This is a complete love that he's talking about. It's not just an infatuation with God. There are millions of people that have an infatuation with God. They think it's love. It's not really love. They have no desire to know him further. In fact, our Muslim friends say you can't really know God anyway. You can never have a relationship with God. No way. That's even wrong to consider. But Jesus said, listen, you want to know what the greatest commandment is? Because biblical love is based on the greatest good, and God wants the greatest good for you. And he says, love me. Love me with your emotion. You need to feel me. Love me with your mind and your soul. You need to know me. Love me with your strength. As a result, you need to do for me. That's what Jesus is saying here. Would you put this down? That second bullet point, it's demonstrated by obedience. How do I demonstrate that I love God like this? By obedience. Look in your notes there, John 14:15. Jesus said, if you love me, what's it say? Guess what? Same chapter, few verses down, verse 21. Those who accept my commandments and obey them are the ones who love me. Wow. Guess what? Same chapter, 2 verses down, verse 23. Jesus replied, all who love me will do what I say. Whoa. 3 times, 1 chapter, Jesus says, you want to demonstrate true love? Obey. It's just heavy stuff, folks. Again, we know this stuff, but I want you to think about it. Because the reality is, we say all the time, yeah, I love God, but look at your life. Are you obeying him? People come to me all the time with stuff going on in their life. Oh, I really love God. Oh, you do? Oh, interesting. Did you realize that the lifestyle that you're in right now is going totally against his commandments? And you're telling me you love him? Somebody's wrong here, because Jesus says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. You're not keeping his commandments, yet you're telling me you love him. So either he's wrong or you're wrong. Sorry, I'm going to go with him every time. A little better reputation for truth. Somebody said, man, I love God. I love God. But you spend no time fellowshipping with the body of Christ. You spend no time in the Word. You spend no time trying to understand and know Him better. But you love Him? According to what Jesus said, if you love Him, you're going to obey Him. And that's part of obeying Him. He says, don't forsake the fellowship of the assembly. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that doesn't need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You can't do that unless you're in the Word. But you're not in the Word, you're not in fellowship, and yet you love God. Somebody's wrong, because Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey me. You're telling me you love Him, but you're not obeying Him. Somebody's wrong here. I'm going to go with Him, that He's the right one. Nothing against you, except I think you're wrong. So how's that work? Again, don't make it more difficult than it needs to be. Think about it in relationship with your children. If your children, those of us that have raised children, if your children are consistently and constantly rebellious and disobedient, we begin to think what? I don't think they love me, right? I mean, come on. If our kids are constant, now they're going to screw up and they're going to rebel periodically. But if it's consistent, they listen to nothing that you say and they purposely do the opposite, you begin to think, man, why don't my kids love me? Because obedience demonstrates love. Even, get this, if you don't agree with the rule. I grew up in a family that is abnormal today. It used to be more normal. It's abnormal today. My mom and dad are still married after 61 years, 60-some years. And they loved each other the whole time I was growing up. Crazy stuff. They never beat us. Never saw my dad drunk. He had a past, but it was gone by the time I grew up. Never saw him drunk. Never saw him hit my mom. He was a loving guy. He loved us, did stuff with us. I learned how to throw a baseball, as bad as that may be, Danny. I learned how to throw a baseball because my dad would take me out in the backyard and throw a ball with me. I learned how to throw football because my dad was in the backyard throwing football with me. Hey, my dad was a busy guy, but he spent time with us. I grew up loving my dad and respecting my dad. My dad happened to be a pastor too. By the time I got into high school, there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to do that wasn't good. I was around a bunch of rascal guys that wanted to do a bunch of bad things and did do a bunch of bad things. And they would invite me, and I wanted to do them. But I knew if I did these things that I wanted to do, and I got caught, not only would I get in trouble, but it would probably really hurt my dad's reputation as a pastor in a small community. And so there were many times that I wanted to do wrong, disobey my dad's rules, disobey God's rules. I wanted to do this, but I didn't do it. Not because I was some spiritual giant as a high school student. I wasn't. But because I loved and respected my dad, and I didn't want to disappoint him or disrespect his reputation. There were some rules to this day that my dad had that I don't agree with. And I certainly didn't agree with them back then. Didn't understand them, but I followed them. Not because I thought they were right, not even because I believed they were good for me, but because I love and respected him. Now, I know that's strange in the day and age that we live in, but let me tell you the difference. When you raise a child that way, you're raising a child with relationship and not just rules. God, as Father, draws us in to relationship with Him. And He asks us to obey Him as a demonstration of our love, whether we understand His rules all the time or not. Just trust me that I love you and I have best for you. Show me that you love me by obeying me. 1 John 5:3, same author, different audience, but he says this, loving God means keeping his commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome. What does that mean? That means when you do it, you go, all right, I'm going to do this, God, but I don't want to do it. No, you do it, and it's not burdensome because you say, God, I love you. I don't understand this, but I'm going to do it because you're calling me to do it. I want you to notice something. He doesn't say, well, he doesn't call us to love him out of fear. Love me or I'm going to get you. Love me or I'm going to hurt you. Love me or you're going to be sorry you didn't. In fact, Jesus, just hours before he goes to the cross, listen to what he says. I will do what the Father requires of me, so that the world will know that I love the Father. He was getting ready to go to the cross. You think he was excited about that? Man, I've never done this before. This might be fun. No, he's going to die. And what's he say? I'm going to do what the Father is asking me to do because I know I need to do it. It seems really stupid that I'm dying for a bunch of knuckleheads that can't get it right. No, he doesn't. He says, so that the world will know that I love God. Do you understand that when you and I obey God because we love him, it's a testimony to the world? Why do you guys do that? Why do you act that way? Man, because I've got this great Father who loves me, and I want to follow him. Wow, I wish I had a father like that loved me like that. Well, you can. You can have a father like that too. How do you love like Jesus? Well, you got to love God deeper. And that means you got to love him completely. Here's the second thing here. To love like Jesus, you have to learn to love others greater. Love others greater. Jesus said, the second commandment is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. You say, wait a minute. Again, does something seem strange to you? No other commandment, singular, is greater than these, plural. I don't know about you, but I'm not the greatest in English, but something seems wrong here. There we have a commandment, and yet we have two. We have one, but we have two. How can one be two? How does that work? What Jesus is saying is, you won't have the other without the one. Think of it like the sides of a coin. You have one coin, two sides. Here's the reality. If I'm loving God deeper, then I will love others greater. It's just a given. If I'm truly loving God deeper, I will love others greater. And I want you to notice what else it says. Look what it says. Love your neighbor. How? How do I love him? What's it say? As yourself. Now, what I've done in my Bible is I've circled as. Because very important word, little word as or like. It's a simile. It's saying that he's making a comparison. So you want to know how to love like Jesus, you need to love as you love yourself. I need to love others as I love myself? Yeah. Would you put this down? Love others like you love you. Go, I don't love me. Yes, you do. No, I really don't. Yes, you do. You know how I know? There's nobody sitting in here naked this morning. Most of you look very well fed. Some of you more well than others. My guess is that most of you have taken at least a couple of showers over the last 7 days. You're wearing clothes that are probably respectively clean. You will leave here today and you will go find some place to eat, whether it's your home or a restaurant, something on the side of the road. You'll find something to nourish yourself. You know what that is? That's basic love. You're loving you. You're taking care of you. You're making sure that you're fed, that you're clothed, that you're bathed. No, but I think I'm a really bad person. No, deep down you don't. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that struggle with the reality that they do think they're not worth it. And you'll notice that all those things I just talked about are things that they'll let go in their life. They won't take care of themselves bodily. They won't give themselves nutrition. They won't go out of the house and all those things. And it is a demonstration that they really don't love themselves. But that is abnormal. That's not normal. That's why we look at that person and go, wow, they need help. Why do we say that? Because they're not loving themselves like a normal person does. See, normally we love ourselves at least on a basic level. Most of us love ourselves beyond a basic level. The car's running good. It's only 10 years old. It's running great, but I need a new car. Why? Because I deserve it. I need some new clothes. Well, these don't have any holes in them, and there's no stains. What's wrong? They're out of date. They're out of fashion. I need something new. Why? Because I'm worth it. I don't want to eat just a hamburger today. I've worked hard all week. I need a steak. Well, but a hamburger's going to keep you alive and it's going to give you everything you need, probably. Why steak? Because I deserve it. You know what we say when we do those things? And we all do it. What we're saying is, I love me. Now, we don't talk like that because it sounds conceited and it sounds arrogant. Although I have known some people that talk like that. But that's not normal either. That's on the other end of the spectrum. But the bottom line is, you and I love ourselves. And Jesus is saying, look, you at least owe other folks that level of love. And you know what I discovered in this? There's a love check. Ask yourself this question. Am I willing to do for others what I would do for me? Man, that gets tough, doesn't it? But if I'm understanding what Jesus is saying, that's what he's saying. Love others as I love myself. Well, if I think that I should have nice clothes, this struck me years ago, 1992, Hurricane Andrew went through South Florida, hit Miami. Up to that point, it was the most expensive natural disaster that had ever come. We'd never seen a hurricane like that in Florida. I grew up in the state. It was devastating. I drove through neighborhoods that literally I couldn't recognize. I didn't know where I was because all the familiar landmarks were gone. Wiped out. I remember being down south near Homestead where the eye of the hurricane came through. And this area that I had frequented often, there was a mobile home park in that area. We drove by that mobile home park, and the only thing left were the cement slabs that the mobile homes were attached to. And I remember thinking to myself as we're driving through this, where did all that stuff go? It was crazy. Just stuff was gone. It was dumped off somewhere miles away, but it was like a bomb had been dropped. And I remember the school that we worked at the time as a Christian school, and within just a day or so, things started coming in from people all over the country to help others with, which is great. But can I tell you how much junk we got? Junk. Stuff that you're going, are you kidding me? It was like people just started unloading their garage and just, I'm going to guess, and I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess that probably half the stuff we got, we couldn't give it to anybody. It was junk. It was people's hand-me-downs. Very few people came in with boxes of new stuff. You say, wow, you should be thankful that you got anything. Am I willing to do for others what I would do for me? Well, if you give somebody a ham sandwich, that should be good enough. Jesus said we need to love as we love ourselves. It gets real sticky, folks, if you start thinking about it. You want to measure whether we've got the kind of love that we need to have for other people. Ask yourself, am I doing the bare minimum that I would do for me? We could go on and on, but I think you get the point. See, we go through these passages and we just kind of yeah, that's good. Love our God, love our neighbors. I'm going to do that. If you do it, you're going to look like Jesus, but only if you do it like Jesus does it. And then that last bullet point there, love others like Jesus loves you. John 13:34, Jesus said, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as, there it is again, I have loved you. You should love each other. Just as I have loved you. How much did Jesus love us? He died on a cross. See, can I tell you something? And this hurts because I just got to be honest with you. This was so convicting to go through this. But if we're going to love like Jesus, it's going to require, and this isn't in your notes, you might want to write it down, it's going to require sacrifice, some kind of sacrifice. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and what? Gave himself up for her. What's that saying? Husbands, sacrifice your life for your wife. It's tough stuff. I read this week, this guy was talking about how, we are all excited and we celebrate weddings. And yet a wedding, in some ways, is kind of like a funeral. Because if we do marriage the way that God's calling us to do it, it's two people dying to self. So I'm thinking about changing the whole way that I do weddings now. Instead of white, they're going to wear black. We're going to mourn instead of celebrate. No. But really, if we do it the way that God calls us to do it, I am supposed to be giving me up for this other person. They give themselves up for me. And so if we're both giving up, we're both getting. It's just a crazy way that God does it, but it works. It works. And that's not just to be the kind of love that we have in a marriage relationship. It's the kind of love that God is calling us to in this world. And if we will love each other that way, Jesus said the world's going to take notice. They're going to know that you're my disciples. Unfortunately, we are not loving that way. At least the Church of the United States isn't loving that way to the main part, because we got a lot of people looking at us thinking that they know us by what we don't like and who we think are sinners instead of by our love for each other. You say, well, that's their problem. No. I think it's our problem. If we were loving this way, man, according to what Jesus said, the world will know that we're his disciples. Folks, I just got to tell you, I was absolutely convicted again going through this. Absolutely broken. And then when we sang some of these songs this morning, it was just like a dagger to my heart. I don't love like Jesus, but I want it. And I want you to, because we'll make a difference. He promised we would, if we would just love God deeper and people greater. Mark quoted Romans 5:8 this morning during worship. But God demonstrated his love for us while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. If you're here this morning, you don't understand the amazing love that God has for you. He sent Jesus, his only Son, to die in your place. The greatest gift was given for you. Would you bow your heads, please, and close your eyes?